With the Fan Edition series, Samsung likes to try and offer a competitive experience at a more affordable price. So, does the S23 make sense to buy, or should you spend a little more and go for the S24 instead? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and in this video I'll tell you. Now, there are a couple of things to note when looking at the design and build of these Samsung phones, and is one area which shows why one model is more expensive and the other more affordable, but simultaneously shows that Samsung cares about durability and life-proof qualities even in its cheaper phone ranges. Speaking of the basic size, shape and design, the S23 FE is clearly the cheaper phone. And the biggest telltale sign is the bezel around the display. It's much thicker than the framing around the S24 display, and that means despite being a phone that's close in size to the S24 Plus, the display itself is only 0.2 of an inch larger than the smallest Galaxy S24, sitting somewhere between the regular and the Plus flagship variants. So it doesn't really feel like you're getting much extra benefit for having to put up with the larger, bulkier, heavier phone. You'll also notice that the bottom bezel is thicker than the other three sides, where the premium offering has this really nice uniform thinness and curving at the corners. So that gives the S23 FE an instant feeling of being more of a mid-range phone. It's those refinements that set the premium models apart from the rest, and little things like the camera rings not protruding as far and the vibration motors feeling a little less rattly and loud. That and the precision in the shaping of the metal edges. More obvious distinctions include the fact that the S24 is lighter and slimmer, so is much easier to carry around and feels less bulky. And because of that, and despite the fact that the FE has rounded edges, the S24 is a more comfortable phone to hold and use. A feeling which is further aided by the fact that it has a frosted textured soft glass on the back and not a glossy surface that's on the S23 FE. That shiny texture makes it less grippy and more likely to slide off surfaces that you put it down on. To its credit, Samsung has made the S23 FE water and dust resistant to the same high level of the S24, but uses older, less durable glass on the front and the back, and a slightly less durable aluminium frame around the edges. Now, as I've briefly mentioned already, the displays are a point of difference between the FE and the S24, and while the basic difference in size is the first thing that stands out, there are other ways in which you can tell why the S24 is more expensive. So it's 6.4 inches versus 6.2 inches, but then if you really want a larger screen without any sacrifices, there is the S24 Plus, which has a 6.7 inch panel in a body that's slimmer and lighter than the S23 FE. If you read the spec sheets, you'll see the two phones do share some similarities in the display area, like they can both technically reach 120Hz and display HDR10 plus content. However, that doesn't mean the experience of watching them or even touching and swiping on them is the same. For instance, the S24 is a generally much brighter panel, and that means darker HDR scenes in your favourite shows are more easy to see, and the phone is easier to read and watch in bright daylight outside too, cutting through reflections better. Colour and detail processing are very different too. What I found generally was that the colour saturation on the S23 FE was higher, and that often leads to photos, videos and even app icons feeling unrealistically colourful, just pushing into the realm of hyperreal a bit too much, and that means the experience is tarnished a little. And while both can reach 120Hz, the S24 definitely had a smoother, more responsive feel, and part of that is down to the type of display panel being used. It's more efficient and has the ability to ramp refresh rates up and down at smaller increments. But the other reason for that is that the FE has an older chipset, which in this unit is an Exynos powered older model, which I'll go into a bit later. Both have an in-display fingerprint sensor too, and again the two phones couldn't be more different. S24 uses a new ultrasonic fingerprint scanner which is super fast, reliable and easy to set up. It hasn't failed once in my time using it. The S23 FE scanner is one of the worst optical scanners I've used in a long time. It took me multiple tries to set it up in the first place, and afterwards struggles with unlocking first time every time. It's been pretty frustrating. Software is near enough identical on both though. In fact, the FE has been updated to One UI 6.1 based on Android 14, which is the same software that runs on the S24, including some of the Galaxy AI features. The only difference really being that the S24 will get updates for 7 years, where the FE will get major updates for 4 and security patches for 5, and is already more than 6 months into its first year at the time I made this video. Now let's talk performance a bit, because the FE is equipped with the same processing platform used 2 years ago in the Galaxy S22. In my particular case, that's the Exynos 2200, which is powerful and fast, but doesn't always lead to a flagship level experience in every regard. There are times I noticed where Samsung has tightened tightened up the experience and improved things on the latest models. Sometimes that's as simple as swiping to go to the home screen on the phone, or bringing down notifications and quick settings. The FE would sometimes stutter to life rather than being smooth, quick and instant like the S24. Once you get into a game though, whether it be a casual or graphically quite intense title, the phone seems fast and responsive enough, but again, feels a little like it struggles more once you get a bit further into game time. Still, for the most part, it does well. There's no denying that the S24 is a faster, more powerful device, however. It'll score considerably higher in benchmarks and seems to cope really well with intense games that put a higher demand on the chipset, especially once you've been playing for more than 10 or 15 minutes. Both get a little bit warm after a while, especially when plugged into charge, but neither becomes so hot that it's unbearable. So you might yet again make deductions on battery life based on the spec sheet alone, and if you did, you might be surprised to know that when it came to actual use, I got a bit more out of the smaller battery in the S24 than I did from the S23 FE. And there's more than one reason for this. First and foremost though is that the chipset powering the S24 is newer, and while it's more powerful, it's also more efficient. While playing games, it just doesn't seem to use as much power as the older platform that powers the FE. Combine that with an adaptive refresh screen which can go from 120Hz down to 1Hz quickly, and you have a powerful machine that knows how to manage its battery usage. With my own typical usage, which is about 3 hours of casual use every day, I usually end the day with about 40% left over on the S24. With the S23 FE being used in a similar manner, it was a little less, despite the extra 500 mAh capacity. So cameras, and both have triple camera systems, both with a similar makeup too, with a primary, an ultrawide and a 3x optical zoom. And actually, if we're talking daytime photo results, the differences between them are quite small. At least, they are when you're looking at the primary cameras. You'll get vibrant shots with that classic Samsung over-processing where contrast and colours are boosted. Plus, exposure is a little high to the point where highlights can get a little bit blown out and lose detail. They don't do a bad job of lifting light from the shadows though, but do sometimes struggle a bit with motion blur. Now, results aren't identical, and the S23 is pretty well equipped. In fact, in bright daylight shooting outdoors, it's pretty hard to separate them, at least when comparing the two main cameras. There is a sense to me though, especially when looking at the ultra-wide camera, that the S23 FE ramps up the colours a little more, making them more unrealistic, but in an effort to disguise the fact that details and textures aren't being faithfully replicated. So the pictures can seem a bit fuzzy, especially when light levels start to drop. Neither zoom camera is particularly great, and again, it's in lower light situations that results start to look a bit ropey from this camera too. They're fine if you're shooting landscapes from far away, but for anything closer it can get pretty grainy, noisy and dark, losing natural textures. The FE results do look worse of the two with this lens, but the S24 isn't particularly great either. Both phones make pretty light work of night mode scenes where you can quickly snap a shot at nighttime, and within a couple of seconds you get an image that's stabilized and sharp. Again, the colors are far too saturated from the S23 FE's ultrawide, and it also seems to ramp up saturation more in general, giving colors some vibrancy to disguise that the details are rough. And the noise and the grain in the shadows is quite obvious too when you go looking. So, should you save money? I think that depends. To me, there are clear compromises to going with the S23 FE, especially when comparing to the S24. If you want that bigger screen but don't want to spend the money on the Plus, it might be worth it. But for a couple of $100 extra or pounds, the S24 is better in nearly every department. It's got a better, albeit smaller display, has better performance and battery life, and a device that's smaller, lighter and more durable, and will be supported for much longer with software updates too. The only way the FE looks like a good value proposition is when you compare it to the larger S24 Plus, at which point you might start to think that saving money could be worthwhile. But even here, I'd say if cost is your primary concern, the Galaxy A55 might make a better buy. Or even getting one of last year's S23 models, which are much cheaper now and much better than the FE. So no, for so many reasons, I don't think it's worth getting the S23 FE or saving the money. I think it's a phone which, at this point in 2024, is an easy one to ignore. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below. Am I completely wrong? Or you can get me on Threads, I'm at Cam Bunton. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.